Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to um, today's episode. The title is When Deep Thoughts Emerge, and I would like to speak about how we human beings find ourselves in a mystery of existence, and the way we find ourselves, it's as if we have awakened in a reality. Now, waking up in a reality, I kind of feel there can be always an option where the reality appears as a room. So, for example, when I, as a person, have a dream state, that is a different room of self conception than when in my conscious waking state. How I feel conception is. When deep thoughts emerge, really, I think depth arises in anywhere where concentration remains in meditation. I remember this was in the early days of my life that somehow meditation was peeking out of the corner of my Persian reality. In my youth, I remember I wanted to clean my room. This was when I was like, I don't know, maybe I was 12. You know, I wanted to clean my room, but I didn't want to exert work. And it was kind of like I wanted to. I had heard of this idea called telekinesis, and it was this story I had read on some forum online at the time, where as if like, how can I tell you? It was. I read this article that was kind of giving a hilarious, ridiculous instruction on how to move stuff, and I was like this kid looking at this article, and in this article, I'll never forget. There was this kind of the article was trying to help make the person move a candle flame, okay, by just staring at it, and there was the different methods the article was laying out, and I remember at that time, I remember I printed the papers, and it's in like one of my I don't know, some of my writing since when I was 12, you know. And so the meditation, in the thing, they said there's an approach where you look at the candle flame, you become the candle flame, and then you move yourself, which in turn moves the candle flame. Now, at the time, it was kind of strange for me to kind of pinpoint every flickering of the candle flame to related to me causing the movement. So it was just this playful thing where in my youth I was looking to see kind of what telekinesis was, but indirectly there was a meditative technique there, the single pointedness of the mind. And this single pointedness of the mind is required, guys. It's pretty much how you recharge yourself in the conscious waking state. That means pretty much you're an entity, a creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere. As you go about your day, think of it this way, that the world is interacting with you and you're interacting with the world. The way the world interacts with you is that it gives you certain pressures. These pressures tend to be handled subconsciously as a personality, but in other ways, these pressures can be intense. I have seen human beings, even myself, be kind of devalued and invalidated by the speech of others. There was a time, before 2011, language was, I would take language seriously. After 2011, where I had this experience on a rock in the middle of a river, I asked myself who's looking through my eyes, and I realized I don't know. And that was the first moment in my life where my world broke, where my inner realms broke consciously. This single pointedness of life is very fascinating because when you look at it, you have strangely been meditating on your existence every conscious moment of your being. You are like an expert meditator. If you were to meditate, if like the guru said, meditate on yourself, you as a human being have been looking at yourself. Now, in regards to deep thoughts, we are in some sense wondering about what is beyond the surface, and so the surface appears to be sensory perception. Okay? So right now we are pretty much spaces which senses take a certain form in. We are a life form. Life is this unknown dynamism of a changing world, and this intelligence is brushing off on temporary forms. As if where God walked, every footstep became a paradise. I feel that we human beings are creatures of transformation. We are not creatures of static beliefs. We're not creatures to wear language like a mask and never change. The world changes whether we like it or not. And some of the beautiful moments of my life was when I was, I can tell you, I received the command from my moment. Now, in order to explain that to you, you see, throughout the day, the person, you have access to your egoic construct. You know, you are a person. Don't forget this. I am, even though I'm speaking about multidimensional perception, even though I'm speaking about higher dimensions, which inevitably move us beyond the language threshold, this doesn't mean the way you're existing as a creature is wrong. It just means that the only thing that can be wrong is how you perceive what you perceive. Or as Epictetus would say, we suffer not from the events in our lives, but but the judgments we have about them. But from the judgments we have about them. This Greek Stoic said this, stoically inclined philosopher. And the Stoics had incredible access to relationship with the world. For me, I would say the shaman is very, you can say, an intuitive being, but underneath the shaman you would find the Stoic. The Stoic is the human being that has become sensitive to how behavior influences, and behavior and attitude influence the presentation of the moment. That means so many people who are having trouble throughout the day, you might not believe it, but if you just slowed down your psychological expression, the speed of your life, you just slowed down, you would be surprised how many problems would go away. There's something in life, guys, and it's the endurance of acceptance of being. Those beings who can stand their ground in their unknown moments of life, that is the strength, really, because we leave empty-handed. What does that mean? That means Alexander the Great, this great conqueror, you know, when he passed away, they put him on a boat, as was tradition, and he had instructed that his arms be open. And many people in town were like, "Why was Alexander the Great's arms open when the ship was burning and going into the ocean as a sign of honor?" And the answer was because Alexander the Great had attained a wisdom where he was saying, "People of the world, I came and I was like the most, one of the most badass conquerors, you know." So Alexander the Great came and he was a conqueror, but he left empty-handed. And sometimes you can't blame history because that is how the world chose to move in that moment. So Alexander the Great even knew there's a wave of empty-handedness that will hit the being. In this lifetime, I have, of course, experienced actual deaths in dream states. I have died a couple times in my dreams. And even a few seconds after the moment where I've died in the dream, where in the dream state I was disembodied. It's kind of strange. Right now we are a simulation of characterhood in an individual conscious modality. So many beings don't realize, but your mind is being your whole moment, not just the contents in it. And the more fragmentation you have, the more divided you are, the more conquered by karma you are. So welcome to the chat, everyone. Feel free to share ideas and throw firewood in these discussions I'm originating. I can't emphasize this enough, but pretty much the human being needs to master, or at least confront and acknowledge certain levels, certain states of mind, and afterwards their mind will trust due to familiarity. You see, it's kind of hilarious. We are human beings that have kind of, just like how we discovered fire, like the caveman was like, "Ooh," like, holy shit. The caveman freaked out. It saw fire, and I think how it happened was lightning. Really, a burning branch fell, and an ape mystically picked that burning branch and threw it on a bush, and the whole tribe, or soon to be tribe, enjoyed the fire. It was something discovered. It was something that wasn't there. Then it came into position. Okay, so when we wonder about all those moments in history before languages developed, and I don't know how many people know this, but languages didn't just pop out like plants. You see, there were smaller, fragmented realities where before nationalism, really there were so many dialects around the world. People were speaking about the same stuff, but everybody was speaking differently until the development of nationalism, where languages began becoming solidified. You know, right now I would say English is one of the most crucial languages, but hilariously, in many traditions, English is known as a slave language. Now, let me tell you why. I got offended by this when I first heard it. But let me tell you why. Because, you see, language is sculpting. With subjects are being sculpted into objects, or objects are being sculpted into subjects or accepted as objects. Guys, it's really chilly. Let me get a jacket. I'll be back. Okay. So, all right, guys, I'm back. All right. So let's see. Where were we going with the talk? I don't know, guys. Pretty much this idea that we are human beings that have been conditioned and raised in a world to perceive it in a singular dimension, to maintain our survival in a singular dimension. But now I feel through an awareness of the void, we are becoming aware of the multidimensional. And really, when the singular gets bored, it becomes multidimensional. It's kind of like thinking, what is the value of one world, and what is the value of many worlds, and why is this cosmic landscape potentially much bigger than we have access to it, because multidimensionality can be defined in different ways. It can be defined based on the limitation of a being, so it's as if we are in a giant dark room but we only see a little bit of the dark room, so that's why it appears like there's an unconscious, there's deeper dimensions. Or even if we saw the light in the room, there would still be hidden realms. So self-imposed multidimensionality and world-imposed multidimensionality. What is an existential mystery? And for now, I can locate a mystery as the experiencer of existence. You know, the existence seems to be known. The content, the sensory perception, even the receiver of the sensory perception, the physical body, it's known. That means when I look at the objective realm, I see it as if it's nature's program. When I look at the subjective realm, I wonder to what extent of the subjective realm is my program. And when you trust your inner realms, and then when you trust it, that means you're sensitive to the inner space. And when there is a subtle shift or change in the inner space, you will notice that as a sort of unknown effort of the world. So we can say the world is happening to people and the self is happening to the world. And there are known and unknown dimensions. So what does that mean? That means you could feel like a known self in an unknown world. You can feel like an unknown self in a known world. You can feel like an unknown self in an unknown world. You can see the whole kind of game theory display of it. That there is, for me, I'm telling you, there's something beautiful that I feel every concept ever made has a geometrical translation. I'm telling you guys, it's strange. It's as if, like, in this lifetime, in my inner realms, I've remembered a geometrical language. And this geometrical language is one where it has to do with the how can I tell you, like, your inner realms, and when your inner realms move in unknown ways, where in that sense it has appeared to me as a term I've created. I called it living geometry, geometrical abstraction that is alive before you look at it. It's moving before you look at it. So it's either an effort of a subconscious self, or it is in some sense the unknown. You can say man's whole thing about knowledge, or species' attempt at knowledge, is really making the unknown known. Is it not? There's always endless room to explore this universe. And the more The more sophistication we impose on it, the deeper the mystery becomes. So what I'm telling you is, it's kind of funny, guys. Human beings are, they find themselves in an finite experience in an infinite existence. Now, this finite experiencer, this traveler, as intelligence in space, I don't know how to tell you, but it's like my body and my mind are employed by a witness which can be nothing else other than the whole moment. So you see, what is here is here. What is here is here. It's like opening your eyes as a child in the ignorance of the extremes of the cyberspace culture and not knowing whether life, it's like at that point you won't be wondering if life is a dream. You're going to wonder if life is a digital simulation. I remember I'd given this talk where I had shared this illustration, this picture, and I don't know who the artist was, but the artist was incredible. And the artist had drawn a person with a gun looking from an alleyway at a person which was glitching out of that simulation. So literally imagine the same ways the ancient yogis said, kind of like the first yogis, how can I tell you, like they would, I don't want to say self-immolate like what we found in Vietnam, but they go into a state where their attention and inner realms are moving at a faster speed than their biological realms can relate. So imagine it will be a point where it's as if the last breath is kind of like how the body is saying goodbye to the ship that's sailing into the unknown as the unknown. So, guys, these talks. You gotta understand. I'm not giving a speech in a UN. I'm just sitting on my porch. I've turned on the phone and I'm just recording it, guys. So, on some level, I have to give myself the internal comfort to give the talk, and also have to endure certain external inefficiencies. But the whole point of my talk and everything I'm saying is that you got to become comfortable with silence and stillness, right? So you see, anytime the world doesn't meet the expectations of your inner realm, you can hate it. Did you know? Did you know it is easier to destroy something than create it? Did you know that it takes many years for buildings to rise, but it can in one day be demolished? Do you know? And so the only thing that I find is inefficiency is when the effort stops, not the performance. Do you know? Because we are not machines. If I was a machine right now, yes, I could accept people's commentary. But really, guys, the thing is, intention is very crucial, you know? Uh, by the way, in the chat section, guys, I went to get my jacket to prepare for the cold. You know, it was a survival reason intermission. Oh, how nature moves. Every moment is filled with endless potential for storification. I can tell you that my life has not just been kind of a journey of something that is here. It is something that has had to keep itself here. It is something that has had to put an effort into its own meaning to see deeper dimensions in it. And that's the thing about life, guys. It's not just me saying this. Ludwig van Beethoven has this incredible quote. He says, "Don't just practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. For it and knowledge can raise men to the divine." And what he means there is that you are alive once, and the performance of eons has begun. And so it is only with the conscious attention. Our consciousness is a recent evolutionary update. It is, you can say, the greatest tool that the creature has been bestowed on this earth, a mind that saw, a mind that acknowledged, and a mind that envisioned. So for me, after some point, it goes away from human spectrums and hierarchies. We suddenly realize we are in the silence of the cosmos, that all our judgments, all our ideas are hovering in the middle of nowhere. All our hate, all our love is hovering in the middle of nowhere. And we have looked at nowhere and we're like, all right, it's now here. The evolution of nowhere into now here is by far the greatest show on earth. And I am bringing up a chaotic idea for the species. And on some level, trust me, I have said things that on some level an archetype of mind has been shunned, as I have said it. What that means is, unless you find a freedom from how everything in life is obsessively being put into thoughts, you will not see that beyond the sky there are no rulers. There are no hierarchies, that perhaps the angels existed because man did. When I think about Abrahamic context, I look at religion as this artwork that has endured for some mysterious reason. You know, something kept human beings looking at this idea, and when I look at it, it's like an artwork. An artwork I will never be able to understand how the artist held the brush, but it is something that it is suggesting that beyond man's sensory perception, there are deeper dimensions, and these deeper dimensions exist only to assist man. That means I can totally see when you're someone in your life, you have lost everything. You have reached the brink of your own self-destruction. You will find a moment where you will say, I couldn't do it. And then you will wonder what can. And then the mind will jump into an archetypal relationship with the cosmos. Suddenly mystery will be allowed. You see, if I would totally limit these talks of mine to pure materiality, if we were a pure material society, even whatever scientist finds a result, an experiment, you know, the glorious adventure, the glorious might of the scientific method is in some sense confused as it brings the scientific findings and results of the experimentation to a society that has imagination, to a society that is emotionally deciding. That means you can be in front of someone and they could tell you the rational thing and you could just not feel. You could just feel. You can be a juggernaut of a closed encapsulation of that your own inner realms are only right. Do you know how easy it is? Let me tell you, I have a twin brother, and when you have a twin brother, you can say you don't just have physical fights, you have conceptual, philosophical fights on the nature of existence as well. You know, when you're young. So it's a situation where I have had many instances where I have pushed reality forth, and I have been pushed by other people's realities. But the point is not the language. This is why I don't fight language, or the best way to fight language is through silence. Because silence is the permission of the new. Tell me one moment of novelty you've experienced, any moment of profoundness you've experienced where there wasn't a silent stillness and then a subtle emergence. Something happened. Do you know? And that's the cool thing about life. Our attention is the designer of the worlds we dwell in. And that's why I'm saying our species is, believe it or not, functioning at an 8-year-old level. Our species just wants to play with toys, not caring what is outside of the windows that are near it. When I chose this submarine wallpaper, for me, there is something about. I remember it's like you can say swimming is a multidimensional experience for me, where underwater the density of reality, how intense reality happens, is different. And I am telling you, the mind has a multidimensionality to it that we only see one room we're in, but we're in multiple rooms. And really, this idea about deep thoughts, guys. What are deep thoughts? How can a thought be deep? What is a thought even to even be deep? And you see, when we think about the depths, we think about the source. And it's an attempt to reverse engineer out of a linear story into the mystery of the nonlinear, into the mystery of how, like, it's like the way children are being kind of, how can I tell you, there's a way a person can open their eyes where they just want to see straight lines in nature. They look at every tree and they're like, that's ugly. They look at meaningless nature and they're like, that's messed up. Why is that there? You know, why did nature design a bird that just rests in its nest? And so you kind of look at this and you see that there's also a way where after the straightest line has been drawn, what is the art of the beyond? It is the curvature of the moment. I am telling you, we are in a geometrical simulation. At least I interpret it as that in regards to navigating it. For me, I am telling you, geometry, you can say all other languages are for the mind, but geometry is the language of the soul. What that means is every sound, every movement, has a geometrical value, and that geometrical value is fractal. So what does that mean? That means you are finding not your body on the shoulder of a giant known as Earth. You're finding your mind on the shoulder of the unknown. You know, the poet Rumi from 700 years ago, the Sufi mystic, he has this saying. He says, I have lived on the edge of insanity. He says on the lip of insanity, but the word lip in Farsi, it means edge also, you know? So he says, I have lived on the edge of insanity, on the lip of insanity, as if he has wondered about the depths of the nature of reality and thought, that he has kind of reached his. Let me tell you what happens when you reverse engineer through mystical self-inquiry. It's mysticism is not for the faint of heart. What I'm talking about is not for a person that still feels the world has to be something. So what I mean by that is that we are natural beings. Unnatural modes of perception tend to have more error if you pay attention. It's kind of like trying to get a robot to predict, human behavior. It's like, no way. Not that no way. I mean, it can. What I'm saying, it can't predict the inspiration of the free will. We are realizing, and I am telling you, it's a pattern that oscillates in society. This is why I say it's the era of the advanced communicators. And before that, it was the era of language worship. That means back in the day, let's say the chimp picked up a chunk of mud and threw that at another ape. Now, we don't throw mud at each other, we throw language at each other. But then, we kind of also notice that this language is a tool. It's kind of, when I wonder about consciousness, it's very hard to personalize or personify something that is always changing. I wanted to also. In my inner realms, I have kind of read quotes of certain philosophers and in my attempt to comprehend the viewpoint, have found myself totally be evoked in a new archetypal position. You see, it's advanced technology. We don't realize it, but every person who has a belief, you are dressed in language behind your eyes. And this language, Mr. Within is saying, just keep it loose, be playful with the changing world, or it will drive you insane. Do you know how many times that I've strived for a sort of perfection? Even that Beethoven quote, what I was telling you, force your way into the secrets of your art. So like, you know how many times I've strived for a sort of perfection in the moment, only to realize that perfection was only seen by me, or that imperfection was only seen by me. Do you know this is why they say whatever you do in life, just keep going. You know. That is the greatest advice, really. Because the unknown is here. Who can tell you what the unknown is? Until I found simpler, natural ways that I existed for myself, life was a bewilderment in a complexity that was constantly changing it. So you see, this is the difference between conscious living and, you can say, a sort of escapism living. Some people, when they look at the unknown and the mysterious, they kind of forget their knowledge, right? We think our knowledge, okay, we saw it, let's see what else. But really, when you go to see what else, you see from the unknown your knowledge has arose. That means it's like a sudden, I'm telling you, every person on this planet that considers themselves on a spiritual journey, you are literally going on a roller coaster that's like a circle. You will come back after your most enlightened gaze upon this planet to the recognition that from the beginning it was here all along. That the truth, so many people, it kind of makes me cry and smile at the same time, where I see like the playful innocence of a creature is searching the manifest objective realm for a subjective truth, only to realize the mind is non-local. And that's when the tears come. There has been times where I have wondered about my grandchildren like 1,000 years from now, potentially. And I was wondering, how would they live? How would they see? How would they breathe? Only for me to realize that the way Civilization 1.0, which is how I acknowledge 2020, how civilization appears, it's like if Civilization 1.0 continues, it's going to become Civilization 0.0, which means it's going to go extinct. And the reason is because it is too oblivious to how its footsteps are sending shocks of disturbance into nature. We don't realize it, but I am telling you, to be gentle means the earth, it's like kind of like no longer being at war with the soul of your planet. We have ascended from animalhood, but we are not animals. We're not mere animals. We see something that no other species sees like we do. We see beyond our clouds. We wonder about the animation of God. So guys, um, can I ask you a question? In the past 10 minutes, have you heard anything that I've said? Can someone just respond in the chat section so I know how it's coming across? Or let me actually check it myself. So, guys, let me tell you what I think is going on. I think the video is actually going to be at the end of it processed fully. Okay? And I don't know, I think maybe the buffering, because when I just played the video back, so right now as I'm giving the live stream, I have access to what is being recorded. So I just went back and listened to the last couple seconds, and on my side, it shows that it's recorded. so everything's recorded. Maybe there's sudden jumps between one sentence into another sentence as if the streaming software didn't record the beginning. But I think, don't worry, at the end of it, maybe it's all going to be there. I don't know, guys. This is the best my Wi-Fi can do. So just hang in there, you know. It's sometimes there's a strange joy in letting like kind of action through inaction. I don't know why, but there's um, sometimes when they say patience is a virtue, it's kind of like watching allows more data to be processed before decision. How fascinating is that, really? You know, they don't teach this in the educational system, that we are not just objects or subjects. We are an observational phenomenon. A phenomena that has access to an observance of itself that is not just purely limited to one content or part of the moment. So I want to guys, to be honest, yes, last night I remember writing notes. I wanted to do a tribute to Hegel, like a full episode as a tribute to Hegel, and his kind of some of his outlines of his like pretty much certain blueprints of how he saw phenomenology. Every person is seeing the world, of course. Every person has a different DNA, so it's like we don't have the same eyes to even agree to the same things, but we have. How can I tell you? We're all starting from the unique wonder of our inner realms. So the cool thing about seeing another human being on this earth is that there are worlds and personalities and characteristics behind the eyes of that person. And for me, I feel if we get a more sophisticated acknowledgement of human intelligence, it is going to solve a lot of discrimination problems, a lot of blind perversion problems. You know, because I am telling you, when you look at a system, you can find examples of chaotic patterns and you can find examples of ordered patterns. So I'm not sitting here feeling like everything is a utopia. You know, there's this just pure everything is 24/7 happiness. If everything was 24/7 happiness, you're not existing on Earth. You're existing in somewhere else. Because this world changes. It's like the weather changes. The ideological constitution and validity of various moments change in regards to the next action being done. That means, are you what you did yesterday, or are you what you will do tomorrow? And I feel we are never what we are yesterday. Many yogis, many sages, they have said the past is past. What you gonna do? You know, Hegel, he speaks here right now. I'm gonna read some stuff from him I found online, which I feel is I was looking into is you see, every philosopher, the cool thing about them is they have their own world building process. That means the way that human being, every human being has a dictionary of their own experiences of every concept. You know? So there's some entry about pretty much Hegel giving a comment on the relation of master and slave as different components of the intelligence of the moment of the human being. He says this is a kind of course, this is like number 33. How would I tell you? Like, I'm just going to read it, guys, it's easier. Hegel says, but independence is freedom not outside of and from the sensuous, immediate extent being, but rather as freedom in the same. That means it's like you're not finding just a freedom by deviating, you're finding a freedom through being already. The one moment, so Hegel says, but independence is freedom not outside of and from the sensuous immediate extent being, but rather as freedom in the same. The one moment is as necessary as the other, but they are not of the same value, for the reason that non-identity enters, that to one of two self-consciousnesses, freedom passes for the essential in opposition to sensuous extant being. So when Hegel says the one moment is as necessary as the other, but they are not of the same value, I perceive, I comprehend that in the sense that your presence is not fragmented, your personality is. They are simultaneously being each other as the moment. You have two eyes that are seeing one view. Do you see how fascinating that is? As if two dimensions being one expression, you know? So this would be a phenomenal idea, I feel, a contribution to our ontology when we see that the world is not just one world, it's an interaction of dimensions. And when I say an interaction of dimensions, this is much more complex than just seeing the universe as a room where there are certain laws in it, you know? It is seeing as if dimensions of being are dancing and two eyes are seeing the same vision. Even though it's two different eyes. That means if you close your right eye, you see a different aspect of the view. You close your left eye and your right eye is open, you see a different aspect of the view. But when both eyes are open, as if both dimensions of access merged. He says then, for the reason that non-identity enters, the unknown, you can say that to one of two self-consciousnesses, freedom passes for the essential in opposition to sensuous extent being. What does that mean? That means if there were two consciousnesses, that would mean two inner realms. For each inner realm, the passage, you can say, or them kind of wondering about the opposite of what they're seeing, you know, that is the freedom. Freedom is seeing beyond. So that means if you have person A and person B conversing with one another, the freedom of both people will not be just seeing something outside, but seeing how, from their viewpoint, they're getting access to a set of the spectrum, a set of information, and then there's coming the wonder and bewilderment of what if, what if, what if. So our what if starts somewhere, from somewhere. He says, while the other, the opposite occurs. With the reciprocal demand for recognition, there enters in determined actuality the mediating relation of master and slave between them, or in general terms, that of service and submission. Bam! He hit the archetype, guys. It's like if Hegel was playing whack-a-mole with mysteries of the universe, he hit one in the head. The service and submission modality duality is an important axis in the constitution of human morality. Do you know? He says, insofar as this diversity of independence is extant through the immediate agency of nature. And I'm telling you guys, really, philosophy can appear incredibly complex, but because the world it's commentating on is kept in a simple presence, eventually the complexity has to be all-inclusive. That means imagine right now you were like back in the day in Europe and you were a philosopher. You know, and so you were like the coolest thing, the most advanced intellectual thing you could do back in the day when people didn't know anything, you know, was that you would at night sit down and there was the candle flame, there was the pen, the paper, and the human mind. And it's as if the writer in writing was comprehending the mystery of existence. You know, was working with the unknown. Creativity is just work with the unknown. Really. Those people who are born with certain talents, let me tell you how that talent arose. That talent arose because you looked at something in this life that your attention was drawn so into and you saw the secret of it. When you see the secret of a skill, then you're seeing the edge of the potential spectrum of manifestation. So you suddenly shift from just being like a Shaolin monk to a Shaolin monk with the certainty of all the potential techniques and ways that phenomena can move in the moment. For example. There's a point earlier point Hegel makes. He says the comprehension of self consciousness as subject, which is at the same time object, gives the mediating relation that another self consciousness exists for the self consciousness. So look at guys. Hegel is a genius. Let me tell you why. Some people come and say, for example, pure objectivity, biological explanation, right? But Hegel is saying by the nature that when we go to comprehend, all right, how am I being conscious as a self right now? That subject you find yourself as is simultaneously being a projection of your objective being. So Hegel is saying just this mediating relationship, just that you are observing yourself as a subject and an object, is in some sense that condition where another self-consciousness exists. So he is not even giving the atoms and the electron the power, the source. He is giving it just by the relationship of observational design of phenomenology. So nature of design doesn't mean it's designed in a way man can understand. There's so many mysteries in nature. And it's good that these mysteries are kept. Friedrich Nietzsche gave a warning. And, I don't know how many people heard the warning. The warning was like, literally, it was cool. It's like a warrior in a battlefield suddenly sounding a horn. And Friedrich Nietzsche, this philosopher, wrote, God is dead, and man killed him. Just such a fascinating complexity of consideration. That God is dead and man killed him. And then when you think of the idea of a man killing a God, it's as if man it stopped looking at the concept, stopped looking at the relationship. And I feel, why is that a warning? Why is Friedrich Nietzsche warning the future generations? Because after God, the next victim is the unknown. And the only way they can take the unknown, they can kill the unknown. Like, imagine that same sentence: the unknown is dead, and knowledge killed it. So you see, that's the thing, that we don't choke ourselves out of the mystery of nature's process, not just particles. Alfred Whitehead, he saw life as a process. That was his fascinating contribution to human vision. That, hey, people, we're not just particles moving around. There's a process going on. And so it's the process of cosmic manifestation, whatever you like to call it. But really, there's a wonder that can't be diminished. It's like there's a light that you have no idea where it's coming from. That's what conscious wakefulness appears to me as, at least. An unknown occurrence that I can't even comment on it. It's like the same way the person doesn't have an opinion on their birth because they didn't even have an ideological consciousness at that point, an identity at that point as a child, being a newborn child. It's like when the newborn child is born and the doctor slaps it on the back and the lungs are set into motion. It's like, in that moment, the baby doesn't turn around. It's like, what you doing, man? I'm going to get you back one day. No, the child doesn't have consciousness. Doesn't have an identity-based consciousness. It doesn't mean there isn't intelligence there. For me, it's like this: human intelligence is the unique thing going on here, and for me, it's too unique. And that too uniqueness, really, I think for most people, it tends to push them into an agnostic hall, in an agnostic coliseum. But I feel that, well, think of it this way: back in the day, imagine there was a chair, and there's a group of people walking, who are bored, and they suddenly, this is a primitive, imagine much like let's say far back in history, and these people let's say even before the 6th century. And these people suddenly see a chair. They just see a random chair, you know, like, and they see this chair and they see suddenly in that moment it's like dark, and then sunlight out of nowhere, like a beam of light, suddenly hit this chair, you know? And all these people are like, they're at the level of idol worship. Imagine back in the day when there was idol worship, you know? These people are like, whoa, this chair is God. Why else would there be light shining on it in this darkness? And so these people start worshiping this chair as God. Until suddenly one guy comes and he's like, what are you guys doing with my chair? Give me my chair back. You know, and they're like, no, don't take our God away from us. You know, and the guy's like, I need my chair, man. And what happens is the guy takes the chair and says, this is a chair. You guys are misinterpreting the design's value. And so what that means is from the era of idol worship, they slapped the objects that we were worshiping out of our hands. You know, the wisdom of the universe does that. Now, what is the next thing? What happened after idol worship? Was that it? We just stopped worshiping all idols and that's it? No. We went to subject worship from object worship. So that's why I'm saying we're all language worshippers until we acknowledge the language threshold. Until we realize experience is present beyond the language that can interpret it. This submarine is not the ocean, but it has access to navigate towards the surface and towards the depths. And really, when deep thoughts emerge, there is no deep thought. It's you. You have, in every moment of your life, been imposing the jurisdiction of your vision. I'm just saying language is an advanced technology. Many continental philosophers, the mystery that was the unknown mind that language, the child had such a complex ability to utilize language. You know, for me it's like this. You see the youngest kids, you know, that they have iPhones, iPads, you know, the kid knows how to use the iPad better than, you know, the kid's parents. You know, so it's children have an aptitude because of their sincere, authentic involvement to quickly learn wherever environment they're put in. You know, like they're a sponge that is just opened from the pack, like a new sponge, compared to a person who's run more laps around the sun. They are like a sponge that is filled. And the water that the sponge is filling itself up is how sensory perception has been appearing as a sort of program of an inner programmer, which is the free will. I'm going to share one more thing that Hegel says about universality of self-consciousness. He says I'll read this first. He says the universal self-consciousness is the intuition of itself, not as a special existence distinct from others, but an intuition of the self-existent universal self. I'm telling you, it's there from before. It's new to us. The new is, you can say, a luxury. Thus, it recognizes itself and the other self-consciousness in itself and is in turn recognized by them. If Carl Jung was in the room, he's gonna be like, Hegel, you're pretty much saying the same thing as I am, because Carl Jung says it's like when the conscious goes to study the unconscious, at some point the collective unconscious is, like your sense of identity, I was a bit extreme there, but like your sense of identity is the consciousness, by making the unconscious conscious, becomes the unconscious moving the conscious. So you are not separate from your mind when you abide as your presence, but when you abide as a personality, you are kind of like self-isolating yourself from all the things that have to be different in order for you to be different. So what that means is we are separating ourselves from the environment. Right now, I'm saying this biological body is my body, not like the trees I see in my yard. The trees are not my body. Like if I want to move my fingers, I can't move the branch like my finger. Do you know what I mean? You see, it's like an objective separation there, you know. But then eventually, pretty much all that you can say in language is pretty much. I'm telling you, I kind of designed a model of it where I call it the ring of the absent heaven. Pretty much all that philosophers can speak about is either the void, the singular, the dualistic, or the infinite. That means these four contexts to phenomena are the edges of the technology of language. Unless we, which hopefully in this lifetime I will get a chance to do and contribute an effort towards, build the next new language. We create a new ethos that gives us an authorization to access different aspects of intelligent, efficient vision, which I think should be the only definition of success. I don't know, guys. I think that everything at the end of the day comes down to what you see and where your questions prioritize your values. An activity can have purpose for others and it can have purpose for self. And if you really, in the chat section, guys, I would say perhaps see, um, is it not important to ask about how clearly we are experiencing our sensory perception? The whole point that I decided to kind of share this idea, it was, how can I tell you, it was I saw that I don't know the self, and this was a profound insight on such a massive level that I became just like a being that watches. So oftentimes when I speak, I am watching. Let's say if a bird flew by in front of you, you can give words to that. But sometimes when your inner realms move, you can give words to that as well. For example, I would suggest, uh, how can I tell you? For example, Ivan, uh, look at how the language emerged, why it emerged, how much the eyes can see. You know, it's kind of like if you can't be simple, you'll fear attempting complexity for the rest of your life. If you have not experienced enough internal breaking, you will not endure. So I'm telling you, some things you do it because of your inner vision. You know, any technology that we don't use goes away. Life, if you consider a creative dimension to life, when you look at, if you had an aerial view, if you had an aerial view on your planet, You know, guys, just a second. I need to clear my throat. Hold on. Guys, by the way, the chat section is a free um, punching bag for exertion of any force. So feel free to go all out. You know, take off the gloves too if you like. You see, guys, there is the mind has the ability that just because of a wave, you know, you know. I don't know, guys. I think there's value in treating language as a technology, really. I think that if we think we are the language, somebody could come and tell you a story and you'll be somebody else based on that story. But it is, you're something more than the language where you can process various streams of thought, various ideas. For me, the curiosity of it is that, like, you listen, we're human beings. Human beings, they're looking at an endless sky. Okay, so what does that mean? That means the inner realms have a potential to fractally, kind of as above, so below, see dimensions to things, right? So the attempt of speech, seldom do people realize, is in some sense, how can I tell you? You're sharing. Every sound in the silence is the evocation of an image, right? All right, guys, I'm getting distracted. Let me make this full screen. You know, Buckminster Fuller had this really interesting approach. And he said, they asked him, why do you invent? Like, that's a good question. Why does a person invent? And he said, and Buckminster Fuller was one of the great designers of this world, I consider. And he said, I just keep creating inventions until one day there's a use found for them. So it doesn't mean that we should limit creativity. We should have as much creative expression as possible, but we should then filter whatever we found access to. You know, this idea I'd come up with, hunter-gatherer of the inner realms. The hunter-gatherers of the inner realms is like, now as a human being in a civilization, we have a responsibility to share the movements of our mind. I feel every human being should be writing a journal of how they're experiencing life and somehow contributing that to this massive archive. Let's say a grand library in the future will be built where every section is just people's names in history. And every human being who wrote something in life, kind of like an institution on this world, imagine, cared for the result of people's inner lives. Do you know how much of life is just you're with yourself, and if you're not content with that, you begin seeing what you dislike in yourself and others and banishing that. You know, so it's so easy to suddenly direct your the complexity of your moment, ascribe it to something else. I say the mind is like sky. Your mind is made of sky. Your body is made of earth. You know, there was a time many poets, poetry was an effort of language to share experience beyond its regular meaning. I mean, when you look at mythology, what is that? It's like an exaggeration or an intensification of the information passed down. It's a twerk. It's the scribe twerked something with the story. So what that means is information is being shared in various levels, and I am saying that we have not been as a species conscious of our inner realms. I haven't met one person in this life that came and spoke to me and in a moment of anger or something, they were like, all right, people, my inner realms are a bit intense right now, I'm going to go somewhere else. Right? I have not seen people be conscious that they are not what they only see. Some people I have seen, but a lot of people I haven't seen. And some people are like that in certain angles and viewpoints, but the overall analysis is that, let me tell you, when any person who becomes a cornered animal, any animal that becomes cornered suddenly becomes beast-like. So this was something very great that Jordan Peterson spoke about, where he spoke about the monster, you know? and how every person, there's a chaotic dimension to them and there's an ordered dimension to them. Now, if they don't care about the order, guess what their expression is going to be? They're not going to care for anything. They're going to try to, how can I tell you, um, uh, find their company in the crowds of uh, mouth thirsty crowds. That means there's I don't want to get into kind of like the history of human group psychology. Um, yeah, Jordan Peterson was making this point that you got to confront, as Carl Jung has made the point, of course, that you have to confront your shadow. And it's not, it tends to be not nice to confront your shadow in others, but life happens in many ways that you can't prepare for. That means that the exciting thing about life is not that you know it all and you have a pre-made plan for it, is that it's an happening. It's strangely like a video game, subjective video game that's occurring in just physical space. As Buddha said, there's an emptiness, and we look at the object, and it is the nature of the mind that imposes even a nature. So this cup, if a bird looks at this cup, this isn't a cup. But when a human being looks at it, it's a cup. Why is it a cup? Because of the symbol attribution. How's the symbol attribution there? It's language, it's subjectivity. So when you close your eyes and you remember your child, that's not a purely physical activity. Or it's at least imagination has design, but it's not tangible. Like I can imagine an apple hovering in the air, but I can't pick up that apple and take a bite of it. You see, but the abstraction is visible. That means there in every moment of life there's objects and subjects and there's an observance. That is the space where the object and subject appear. So we are kind of like the candle lit in a dark cosmos, and it doesn't mean the cosmos was empty. It just means that it was dark. We couldn't see anything in it, as if existence existed in the darkness before light entered. You know. So so when the light entered, there was preset conditions, and the mystery of life is its shape. That means, do you know how many days I have just had a cup of coffee and just kind of sat down, on a park bench and kind of just like thought, okay, there is so much we don't know as a species. And so if we don't attempt, why should why should the future generations? Why should you care for a world that is happening in a certain way once every day? You know. And honestly, the reason I'm kind of drawn to giving these talks is because language seems to endure longer. That means like, let's say you eat a food throughout the day, you eat that food and it's gone. But when you, for example, record a podcast, it's there tomorrow. You know. I think if Aristotle, somehow was alive in 2020, I think he'd start a podcast. So, um, so you see, Nick. Listen, how do I know how someone else knows what I'm saying? How can I know? How can I know, for example, Nicholas, that you have understood what I'm saying, or you have understood fragments and then disliked the section and then decided to diminish the whole thing out of value, out of your lack of effort, perhaps, to wonder actually really what if this sequencing of language has some sort of linear meaning, you know? So I'm telling you, listen, it's very easy to put people in boxes, and it's not. It tends to be not wise. So 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 you gotta understand that you are using language from a world that you see and nobody else does, and you're commenting on something external to you with certainty. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of telling me, why are you using language? You're like telling me as a person, why are you using language? And I'm telling you, why are you using language? And that's when your argument will pretty much deconstruct. So I'm telling you, we can fight till the end of time. Our eyes can fight for the truth till the end of time, you know? But if do you think the advanced human being does that? Do you think it's wise? You know, I would have been more impressed by your comment, Nicholas, if you had heard actually something and then commented on it, commented your own vision, because you still haven't, I think, perceived the value of the idea of the School of Athens. The value. What do you think language is? Do you think language is truth? The whole thing I'm telling in these talks is that language can't contain truth. So when language can't contain truth, you can't. Whose language are you criticizing? Are you criticizing your mind, or are you criticizing my mind? Do you see? It's and if you are criticizing the mind of another, how far or how much of their mind do you see to criticize? So I'm telling you, your inner realms are making you feel like Lord Voldemort. Yeah, yeah, I'm telling you guys, there's language is something where you don't know how many times I felt like Achilles, and I have a habit of this. Especially, I one thing that I'm kind of constantly trying to work in developing in myself, at least naturally to some degree, is sometimes when I my inner realms get infuriated, I snipe the anger. I snipe the anger, and that means like it's as if like you see the worst way. To be honest, the worst insult is non-existence. You know, that means the if you would like when you go see those roasts of Donald Trump or roasts of Justin Bieber or like those shows, you know, you know what that is? That is like the an awareness of how non-existential you can make a value. You know. Yes, it's something that it's very evocational, Nicholas. So I would say that language is really like paint, is it not? At least when a person looks at the dictionary, isn't it actually a book of pictures in word? So when a person reads a book, I don't know how people read, but like there was a time in my youth I would read slow because I was trying to make sure everything that was exactly on point, and I would bore myself out of disliking reading. Then one day I wondered, what if I read super fast? Let me just try to be like a sprinter in regards to just reading whatever's on the page. And I remember I attempted it, and what happens is, of course, certain gaps, but because you're getting access to the whole picture, to more pictures, it suddenly begins animating as a film. So you can say reading really fast after a while is like watching a film behind your eyes. So I'm saying that language, words, within them, they harbor worlds, images. Oh God, it's becoming so cold. Winter is coming, guys. Again, you know. I want to share um, one last quote from Zen Master Dogen, and for survival reasons, guys, I gotta go inside. Zen Master Dogen, somebody asks him, as if imagine like somebody's going to work, he's busy, sees on Zen Master Dogen in the market, runs to Zen Master Dogen, and it's like, come on, man, I gotta go to is this Buddhist enlightenment. And Zen Master Dogen sees a ridiculous amount of sincerity in that moment that he's like, all right. And he says the Buddhist path, to walk the Buddhist path, is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to awaken to the nature of all things. We are a presence beyond personality, and I feel as a species we should strive for civilization 2.0, which is the focus of my work. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings, and namaste.